Thank you, Dwayne.
Thank you, Dwayne. So a big warm welcome from me to all of you, and many thanks to all of you from other countries who've come here to this marvellous conference to share your knowledge. I too want to acknowledge the traditional owners, the Wurundjeri, the Woiwurrung speaking peoples here of the Kulin Nations. We live and work on their lands on this side of the river, and are very grateful for the way that they share their knowledge with us too. I want to first of all invite you while you're here to see the exhibition at the Potter Museum of Art on Swanston Street. It's not very far away. I'm sure Dwayne will give you instructions or directions on how to get there. Please make sure that you see the second floor. It's an exhibition of works by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander artists about their astronomy traditions, including the great Seven Sisters sacred narrative that Barry just spoke about. I think you'll enjoy it very much, and it's serendipitously timed to coincide with your conference, and so to see the artworks of the very astronomers, the Indigenous astronomers that some of us have learned from is really a privilege. And I want to also say this: we are all here to achieve a greater understanding of the complex layers of scientific information in Indigenous knowledge, of the stars and the skies, and how this living legacy is important today. These systems of knowledge have inherent value and have led our scientists to better understand celestial phenomena and the history and heritage that constitutes it for all Australians and all people. And when I say astronomers, I mean Indigenous and non-Indigenous. There is so much more to know about Indigenous sky knowledge, and the great challenge is to ensure that the Indigenous astronomers have the opportunity to transmit it to future generations. My hope is that a new generation of astronomers, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous, take up this task of preserving, documenting, and sustaining this bequest from the ancestors and learning from them and from the sky. In my childhood, as I've said in my preface to Dwayne's fabulous book, The First Astronomers, I remember the best of times occasionally, and one that stays with me is lying under the night sky and seeing the Milky Way in all its glory, a great blanket of sparkling lights seeming to hover over me. In my adulthood, I took my children travelling across the country to give them this experience. Far from the city lights, we joked about the Starlight Motel as we lay in our swags next to a small fire and watched the nightly show of the great river of stars moving slowly over us, the twinkling stars, the shooting stars, the Southern Cross, and other great constellations. Distant relatives and family friends had wonderful names like Starlight, Sunlight, and Moonlight. And I knew that in the skies was a world that my people held and cherished. Now we must travel further across the country to find the dark night, free of the glow of the cities and towns, to see the night sky in all its wonder. But what I've learned throughout my adulthood is that our people held great bodies of knowledge about the sky and the bodies in the sky. And only much more recently, when I became aware of this work in the field of astronomy, I learnt that there were specialists, both in our own Indigenous societies and in Western science, who could explain in detail the movement, attributes, patterns, meaning, and significance of happenings in the firmament. So when I met Associate Professor Dwayne Hummaker and learnt about research and collaborations that he's conducted, I had an epiphany. And so I invited Dwayne to join us as a member of our expert panel to advise on the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Curricula Project in 2017. And I'm sure that during the course of the conference, you will be shown the website. It's very simple. It's ngarrnga.org, NGARRNGA.org. And we have a suite of astronomy curricular resources for children from grade 5 to grade 12 that are free to all teachers and schools. And we are presently trialling them in 6 schools. So now all Australian teachers will be able to teach Indigenous sky knowledge, assured of the rigour and authenticity of the information we freely provide to all. And our Australian children, all Australian children, can learn about this great Australian legacy of ancient and living knowledge systems. We also have Dwayne's marvellous book, The First Astronomers. And in Australia, it's the first detailed account of Indigenous sky knowledge. And Dwayne worked with several Indigenous elders, Gillar Michael Anderson, John Barser, David Boson, Ron Day, Sigar Passy, and Allo Tapham. The book is the result of 10 years of patient research, but there is so much more that underlies it. Of course, there have been extraordinary journal articles published since then, and I'm not an expert, but I will mention them because I'm sure that there are people in the room like Dwayne who can talk about these. And one concerns the star Canopus, is that right, Dwayne? Which has in Tasmania a 12,000-year-old history preserved by Indigenous knowledge holders, despite the genocide. And present-day Palawa, people of Tasmania, have worked with Dwayne and others to document the observations that Indigenous people made of that star then and now. There are other extraordinary works in the at the research stage also. It's important that we do this work. And one of the very important reasons is because, especially here in Australia, there are those who deny the intelligence and scientific traditions of Indigenous people. But with our knowledge that the Indigenous astronomers and our astronomers have collaborated on, there is no going back. The idea that the only science is Western science must be consigned to history. But our task is so much more than academic salvage of past traditions. We have an opportunity to create further accounts of both historical and living Indigenous sky knowledge, much of it communicated through the artistic and poetic narratives about the great ancestors who made the world, so that the power of oral traditions become evident, with sky phenomena remembered over hundreds of generations, or deduced with the finely honed observational and analytical skills of the first astronomers themselves. There is so much to talk about in this field, so I must keep my talk short. So I won't mention some of my favourite works out there. Oh, yes, I will. So I'm a descendant of the Iman people of central Queensland. My grandfather was an Iman man. And when I saw the star maps that Gillar Michael Anderson had worked on with Bob Fuller, I immediately recognised the old route that people took, and there's so much more to do on these star maps, because just south of our country, there were giant bunya forests, and people came from thousands of kilometres away to join an annual or biannual feast of bunya nuts. And it was one of the greatest gatherings in our history. It no longer takes place, sadly, but we know so much about it. And people came from many faraway places via the star map routes. And I've learnt just recently about another extension to the star map route that extends down to the central coast of New South Wales. So one of my grandfather's people ended up down on the central coast of New South Wales, intermarried there, and the stories continue there amongst the Gumbaynggirr-speaking people. If we keep asking questions, we'll find more and more answers. And so I'll be following up on that one with you, Dwayne, and your colleagues. One of the things Dwayne says in his book is this: if astronomy is one of the oldest sciences, then astronomers are surely among the oldest scientists. For as long as there have been what we might consider astronomy, there have been those who study, develop, and teach it. And this astronomy was practiced long before the invention of telescopes, electronic cameras, or supercomputers. In First Nations, astronomers are the keepers of knowledge that informs nearly every facet of life and culture. And I want to assure you that our first astronomers are both men, include both men and women. As we know from the Seven Sisters story, that story is kept predominantly by women. And it tells us not just about the Pleiades, but also about the conditions of being female. And it's one of the most powerful and important narratives. It crosses the country from north to south, from northeast Arnhem Land to Port Augusta, and in South Australia on the southern coast. And there are still many segments of the Seven Sisters dreaming track that are observed by women. And so these traditions have more than just a scientific purpose, of course. They have a profound social purpose. So another wonderful example that I want to mention is the example of Betelgeuse, which was long known by Aboriginal peoples, but only discovered by Sir John Herschel in 1840. And it's another one of those great bodies of knowledge about the constellations and the stars that Aboriginal people knew about before scientists told us about them. So I don't want people to think that a Western logic must be applied to Indigenous knowledge. That is far from what we need to achieve and far from the truth. The fact is that Indigenous astronomers knew about, and many still know about, the sun, the ecliptic, sunspots, solstices, and seasons in enormous detail through daily observations of the sun's pathway as it rolls across the sky, remembered in oral traditions, preserved in narratives, songs, designs, and dances. People know about the moon, standstills and eclipses, the variability of stars, and so much more. So if we have the opportunity to speak intimately to the knowledge holders about such things, about moon halos and how rain can be predicted, the survival of people who are so immediately dependent on nature, as so many Indigenous people are, will be more assured. And astronomy is a tremendously important part of the knowledge system that will sustain Indigenous cultures into the future. I learnt more about astronomy when I went to live in the desert as a young anthropologist, and I met a marvellous Pintabee man. His name was Pinta Pinta, which means butterfly. And he taught me in a very gentle and oblique way that the skies above us are part of the environment we live in and part of the estate. And so he made me understand that we as placelings in this world stand on the earth but look up at the sky. And how could it not be so in a culture such as the Pintabee culture in Central Australia and so many others, where life was lived under the stars. So asleep at night, waking up as one does to keep the fire burning, the sky is always there and it changes. And it's breathtaking, and each night is a fleeting and different experience. But in the sky, there are ancestors and stories that are important to the survival of the people who live under them. And it is because they have a deep knowledge of it that they were able to navigate across the deserts, Australia's vast deserts, and memorialise the water bodies, the safe routes, the trading routes, and so much more. And each year we find out more about these knowledge systems. A wonderful example is the Mythica stone arrangements in Queensland. If you have an opportunity to have a look at those, I hope that, you know, the astronomical aspect of those stone arrangements is better understood. So far, they're treated as not predominantly signs of astronomical knowledge, but rather something else. But it's obvious that there's more to learn. So to live and eat well in our cultures meant being guided by our first astronomers, but also taking responsibility ourselves for learning about these great bodies of knowledge. And this is why you are here, to help us keep these wonderful bodies of knowledge alive and to progress our understanding of them. So I want to assure you that this conference is very, very important to us, and that your contributions will be valuable in any way that you make them. So I look forward to seeing the proceedings of the conference and to assisting in the future of this great endeavour, which here at the University of Melbourne is regarded as one of the key areas of our Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous studies program, and you obviously understand why. There is no other university that has a cultural astronomy program such as ours. I'm very pleased that Dwayne has had the opportunity to progress it here, and may 1,000 flowers bloom. Thank you.